This meeting is
Hello,
being
folks.
recorded.
Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 60, and we're doing a special one tonight to kick off semifinal week of the high school state playoffs. I have Kevin and Jay on with me for a semifinal preview. How you doing tonight, fellas?
Doing well.
Doing great.
Good. It's 7:45 as we're recording this, so not quite Kevin's bedtime, but we're getting close. But here we go. Let's recap the game from Friday night against North Linn. West Hancock won that one 52-21 to advance to the state semifinals for the 14th time in school history. The other years, 86, 87, 88, 93, 95, 96, 97, 2006, 07, 2011, 18, 19, 21, and now 22. We are 7-6 in those semifinal games. 5-6 in games played in the Unidome. At one point, obviously, games were played outside and not in the dome. Let's break down the North Linn game. First of all, what do you guys think of the game, just kind of in general?
I thought it was.
Go ahead, Jay.
I thought it was a dominant game in all three phases. Defensively, I thought we were really good. I know we gave up 3 scores, but 2 of them were late. Offensively, I thought it really showed how many different weapons we have in that game. We kind of talked about that all year long, all the different types of ball carriers we have. We had one drive where we went, was it 96 yards, Kevin, or 90 some yards?
Mm-hmm.
And on that particular drive, it was Jackson Peterson, Kellen Smith, Pablo Caez, Mitchell, Kale Zool. So it was a lot of different guys and a lot of different plays and formations that they were hitting them out of. And then, of course, the big special teams answer to the first touchdown by North Linn when Jackson Peterson took one from 80. What did we officially say that was? 82.
82, yep.
82 yards out. So yeah, I thought it was a really dominant performance in all 3 phases. Kids played well. I thought the coaches did a really good job of adjusting offensively throughout that game because North Linn was loaded up to take away the fullback and to take away the quarterback power run game.
Yeah, and then we were running those counters and we're running some outside stuff, and then they kind of took that away, and then that opened up the other stuff, and then Ryland somehow got behind a guy a couple times, and
yeah, I'm not sure how Ryland Barnes gets 10 yards behind a guy on 3rd and 13 late in the game, but yeah, he was running wide open as soon as he left the line of scrimmage. I think I said before that play on the radio, I go, let's make sure we watch where Barnes is at, and I had my eyes on him, and as soon as he got about 2 steps into his route, he was throwing up his hands knowing he was going to be wide open.
You said you don't know how. I do. He's very fast and athletic, so
I thought maybe his coverage would be a little bit geared towards him, but
you would think.
Well, and they have to respect the RPO there with Mitch too, and he had a lot of field in front of him. So when that secondary saw that Mitch had all that green, I think they bit hard on trying to keep him from pulling it down and running, and I think that helped to free up Ryland. And I think one of the other things that I would add to what Jay has said is I think our coaches, we played a pretty good Wapsie Valley team the week before, and we were challenged. And I think our coaches, I don't want to use the term wake up call because it really, one of our players used that term, but I don't know that they really needed a wake up call. But I think they approached this in a very business-like manner. They knew the trip to the Dome was on the line, and I think they were just really focused on what needed to be done that night, and it showed on the field.
Yeah, I tried to look at the game through the North Linn lens. They made a 2.5-hour drive to Britt. First time they'd ever played us. They knew our reputation as defending state champs, long winning streak. Obviously, every team's going to show up thinking they have a chance, and it was a little close at first, and we kind of pulled away, and they scored. And it just makes me wonder, kind of from the other perspective, what that feels like or looks like. I saw on their Twitter page, they said we ran into a buzzsaw tonight, or they made some comment like that, and I'm like, we've said it every time we've done this. We're at a different level right now.
My hats off to Tate Hoggenberry, because that was a gutsy performance. He couldn't have been 100% having missed 2 weeks with the mono, and I thought he played really well, all things considered. And Jay commented on it during the broadcast that we were surprised to see him on defense. We thought
Yeah.
maybe he would just be an offensive only player. And, you know, my hat's off to him because that was a gutsy performance.
Yeah, it was kind of, I mean, I'm a numbers guy, so I didn't want to see us give up double-digit points in a quarter and end another streak I like. But to see the last play of the game, last play of his career ended on a touchdown, that was good for him on the other end.
Yeah, I had that down in my notes here, Kevin. I wanted to make sure we mentioned him and just credited him. Tough kid. He's a terrific competitor. If you follow Iowa sports, high school sports at all, he's one of the most fun kids to watch play basketball. He's just endless energy all over the court. Just a really good competitor, and it was good to see him be able to get out there for his final time with his buddies and compete and show his toughness. Couple other points I wanted to bring up from that game. One, I thought the defensive line dominated that game.
I was just going to say
in particular, Britt Coogee and David Smith. There, to me, I don't, you know, there's all these different all-state teams that'll eventually come out, but I know Brighton, I think was a second teamer last year, but to me, those two are, if I'm drafting a defensive line in Class A, I'm starting with those two guys because they are just all out effort, the strength of Brighton, the speed of and power of David. They just get after guys, and that opens it up for the other D linemen. I thought they did a terrific job in that game. The other thing, it was 6 different guys that scored. We said in the game.
6 rushing touchdowns by 4 guys. JP had the kickoff return, and then Barnes with the touchdown.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So that just goes to show the number of weapons that we have, you know, and then the other thing I wanted to mention, there was a great article in the Globe Gazette about Pablo Calles. He got our player of the game. And I think that article just kind of embodies West Hancock football. I always tell Kevin, like, if you were to not know the history of, you know, West Hancock football, you just seen the warm-ups and you watched us come out. I always say we have, you know, we got the $20 uniforms, but $1 million program compared to some other schools. And if you come out and watch other schools warm up and us warm up and things like that, you may say, oh, you know, this team looks better, you know, just by look and feel. But I tell you what, once the whistles blow and the balls are snapped, we are always the more physical, tougher team. And it doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are. And Pablo kind of embodies that. I mean, let's face it, he's probably 5'5", 5'4", 120, 125, but the kid doesn't miss tackles. He's not afraid of anything. He'll go up against everybody. And he's probably one of the better open field tacklers in the state. I mean, it's just the perfect picture and article of the West Hancock program. I always say it's a bunch of really gritty, tough, and highly, highly competitive kids. And then the coaches work on them to build up the skill that they need to succeed.
Yeah. The jerseys, first of all, if we ever switch away from those jerseys, I'll be very disappointed. We better not. My brother was at the game and he was kind of by the concession stands. So he's like, we could kind of hear on the North Linn sideline, and going back to their perspective at that game, my brother's like, I don't think they knew just how physical and fast our guys were. Like you can see on huddle, we're quick, but I think when you add the physicality to it and it's in person and live, I think it kind of takes some teams by surprise. So
I think our physicality always, that's hard. It's hard to see physicality and just how we wear teams out on film. I mean, we wear teams out year after year after year, especially at the line of scrimmage. And that's just competitiveness, toughness, kids that get in the weight room. And it's hard for that to translate through film, but I always think it's always funny. Like you said, Dan, people talk, you know, and they'll say, oh, look at them, we'll be fine against them. And then after the game, they think, crap, I don't want to ever have to play them again.
What just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin, any last minute things on the North Linn game?
No, I think we've got it covered. I think we, like I said, ultra focused and ready to roll.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to look at the first game for the semifinals, Woodbury Central against Grundy Center. I did most of the work for Jay here, but in the historical part, of course. So Woodbury Central making their second straight semifinal appearance. They beat HMS, I think it was 27-24. HMS was leading with about 6 minutes left in the game, and Woodbury got one last score to win. If you're looking at on the screen here, in the 79, they lost in the semis. They won state in 1980, beat Parkersburg and Ed Thomas. And then they didn't make the playoffs again for 26 years. They had 4 straight years then losing, or not 4 in a row, but 4 out of 5 looks like losing in the first round. We played them 3 years in a row, 2010, 11, and 12. Beat them every time. And then 14, 15 quarters in first round. 2019, they made it to the semis where we beat them handily. And then last year they lost to Grundy 28-7. And then this year they're 3-0 so far in the playoffs for a 15-12 overall record. Jay, what do you have on Woodbury Central?
Good team. They graduated a ton from last year. Last year, All-State quarterback Dallas Plunder, his little brother, who's now a junior, is the new starting quarterback. But they lost an All-State quarterback, most of their top receivers. 11-0 this year, average over 40 points a game, give up just over 11 points a game. Really good football team. Their closest game was in week 7 to Tri-Center. They just squeaked by that one by a couple points, I believe, other than closest game other than the HMS game on Friday night. But really good offensive attack, fun team to watch offensively. They spread it out. They usually go 4 wide, either a trips formation or 2x2, and then they've got a really, really good, tough running back. So don't let it fool you that just because they throw it all over the yard that they don't want to run the ball. Max McGill, I know he's a really good wrestler. He was an all-state linebacker last year. He's run for just over 1,400 yards and 21 touchdowns. So he keeps them balanced. And then from the quarterback spot, Drew Klunder has kind of stepped right in for his brother, Dallas, last year. He's got good size, 6'2". You can see Dan's highlighting it right now. He's thrown for just over 3,000 yards and 35 touchdowns. And anytime a high school kid is throwing the ball almost 300 times and throwing it at a 60% clip, that's pretty efficient in the pass game. And then when you go to their receivers, the thing that impressed me the most was they've got 4 guys over 500 yards, 3 over 700 yards, and of course Eric McGill's got over 1,000 yards. So they spread it around pretty good. I was impressed by the receiver's size. The Schultzen kid is like 6'2". He moves really well. Offensively, when I was watching him, I watched a couple games and watched that HMS game. They do a good job of attacking teams, not just vertically, but horizontally as well. So they really use the full football field to try to stretch out defenses. And Klunder is not afraid to throw the deep ball. In fact, they prefer to try. They almost take a shot every time they have a possession. They'll take at least one shot, 20+ yards down the field. So a ton of weapons. But like Kevin will say, it's a lot of new kids doing it. I know it's a rematch in Grundy Center and Woodbury, but I credit to Grundy Center and Woodbury reloading this year because they lost a lot of key pieces from last year. Defensively, they typically run either a 4-3 or a 4-4. Although my guess is they'll probably go 4-3 just because Grundy will try to spread them out. McGill is the stud defensively, again, linebacker and a really good wrestler. And even though I'm a basketball coach, I know that football coaches would love to have a defense full of wrestlers on their team. Anytime you can do that, you're going to have a lot of good tacklers. But he stood out a lot. The other one, Dan, that stood out, if you want to highlight him, is Chase Copeland. I think it's Chase Copeland. Yeah, number 51.
51.
He stood out on film to me. Good sized kid. He was like 6'2" to 6'4". I'm not sure how he's listed in the program, but really tough defensive end, and their defensive line at good size. So, I would not be surprised to see them pull the upset. I know Grundy Center is favored according to BC Moore, and I think it'll be a very, very good football game. I go back to just breaking down the game quickly. I go back to last year, Grundy won, what was it, 28-7, right?
28-7.
And I know we had talked about this before in a couple podcasts ago. Woodbury Central was down 14-7, about to tie it up in the first half, and threw a pick 6. And then they kind of went into panic mode after that. And if they're able to score on that drive, who knows how that football game goes. So Two teams that'll be really familiar with each other. It'll be interesting to see what type of adjustments Woodbury Central makes to try to move the ball against a really well-coached Grundy Center football team. I think Grundy Center is one, they've last 4 years, they've kind of been them and us as far as the class of Class A defensively. They've always got a really, really good plan. So it'll be interesting to see what Coach Bremer has in store game plan wise, but I expect to see them maybe try to get that ground game established a little bit more with Max McGill, as he's a really, really good football player. He's one of those guys that when you watch him, you're like, man, I wish he played on our team. He's just fun to watch, super tough kid.
Yep. No kick or punt returns for a touchdown this year.
Yeah, no kick or punt returns for a touchdown. And the number that stood out to me the most as far as a weakness was they have not caused a ton of turnovers. 15 turnovers caused between interceptions and fumble recoveries, which is pretty low comparatively to the other Final Four teams.
Yeah, I mean, odds are the other team's just gonna drop the ball more than 5 times in a season.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and no return touchdowns there either. So, Kevin, do you know anything about Grundy Center?
Yeah, Coach Sajak, he's been there. How long has he been there, Dan? I don't remember.
2019 was his first.
19 was his first year.
Okay, so he's 44-5 in those short years that he's been there. They're coming in. They're making their 15th postseason appearance. They're 11-0 this year. They've been 3-time state champions. Those were back to back to back. In 80. Well, no, I guess take that back. 84. The year after I left there, they got really good, and they won a championship in 84. Went back to back in 87 and 88. The 84 one was a 2A championship. 87 and 88 was a 1A championship. And then they had a streak where they bowed out in the first round, all the way from 91 to 94. And then 2011 and 2013, they bowed out in the first round in 2011, second round in 2013. And then in 2015, they played West Hancock in the first round, beat us, and then got beat by Garrigan in the second round. And then, of course, the last 3 years, they've been runners up. Back in 88, I believe it was, semifinals versus West Hancock, or versus Britt at the time. And then the 87 championship game was versus Britt also. So I'm looking at some film on them, and their defense is legit. I really looked at their defense because they come into the defensive rankings with the #1 scoring defense, or in the Class A. They're giving up 97 yards a game rushing, 56 yards a game passing, and just 5 points per game. And they have not given up a touchdown in the first quarter all season. They've given up only 8 touchdowns all season long, pitched up 4 shutouts, as you can see on the screen there, 7 fumble recoveries, and they lead the state in Class A with 16 interceptions on the season. So their defense, like I say, it's a legit defense. When you have defense like that, you don't need to score offense, or don't have to have much offense, but they have plenty of it. And I'm gonna go back to defense once. The standout on the defense, and statistically, and I watched him a little bit, he's legit. Pat Brown the third, 6'4", 212, nice size, moves well, really causes havoc for opposing rushing attacks, and so something that teams are going to have to deal with. Offensively, Colin Gordon took over. We all know that Mr. Kanawha is no longer there, but Colin Gordon took over. Interestingly enough, on the Radio Iowa pregame show last week, Coach Sajak commented about Colin, that he's gotten stronger as the season has gone on. He's leads Class A in the passer rating. They'll run a 4-wide set, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. They're a little bit like Woodbury Central. They do want to run the ball, and that's their primary thing. But they are fully capable of throwing it all over the place. Gordon has completed 108 of 154 passes. He's got just under 1,700 yards on the season, 18 touchdowns and 7 picks. Plus he has 400 rushing yards on that with another 10 touchdowns. The guy is an offensive minded player. He's also their place kicker. He's nailed 44 of the 54 point after attempts this year. And I think he's 1 for 1 on field goal attempts on the season. They do have a decent punt return man in Dylan Kanawha. He's got he leads Class A or second. Check that back. He's second in Class A in punt return yards with 252. And then not sure what the connection is between him and Justin, but Justin is their leading rusher with 674 yards and 17 touchdowns on the season. And then Clay Sock is in the backfield with him. He's just a little bit shy of 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Their receiving core, they've got 4 main guys, and amazingly enough, this team is packed with juniors and sophomores that contribute. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with the next couple of years going forward. Ben Wigman's a senior. He's their leading receiver. He's got 34 receptions on the season, 475 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Tate Jarofsky, hopefully I said that correctly. He's a junior. He's got 5 touchdowns and just about 450 yards receiving yards. And then Turnin Vokes, 17 receptions, 350 yards, 7 touchdowns. And rounding out that list is Tanner Lobby. He's got 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, and 3 of those 4, well, 2 of them are juniors and Vokes a sophomore. Wigman's the only senior amongst that receiving core for them, for those guys. So, and they're loaded with juniors up and down their line, also juniors, sophomores. Got a good amount of freshmen out in the program. Size wise, they are probably going 200 pounds across both lines. They're decent size. Bud Young, a couple of them, but they are a good team, and they've been in the championship game the last 3 years for a reason. They've reloaded a little bit.
And I think it's safe to say that with Kanawha leaving last year, people were like, yep, they had those 3 chances.
Yeah,
that might be it. But I was like, man, I never count them out until they're out.
No, go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, I thought going into, I remember last year looking at their roster and thinking, I remember the Patrick Brown kid from when we played. He's a stud, still is a stud. But I remember Gordon and stuff, but I remember thinking last year after the game, like, you know what, they'll probably be good next year, but I don't know if they'll be able to make a run, but they're probably, skip 1 year and then they'll be back for the 2023 season. Well, they've done a great job. And that's a credit, in my opinion, that's the credit to the type of program that Coach Zajac has really established, and he's leveled it up another level from what they were. And Kevin and I talk about this all the time as far as the teams that reload. This is a great example of it. When Coach Zajac, his first year there in 2019, these guys that are seniors now and juniors now, they're getting all these extra practices with these long playoff runs to build them up to now. You know what I mean? And running, I'm sure they were running scout team the last couple of years, and while they're making deep playoff runs to the championship game, and now it's their turn and they're making hay with it, and they're a really good football team. They're very impressive on film defensively. I don't know if you thought the same thing, Kevin. I just super organized, disciplined, and they don't give up big plays typically.
I went back to their schedule. This reminds me of our schedule last year in the scores. Like, they have 1 game where they gave up double digits. Otherwise, it's 6-7 points or a shutout. Couple close games, so that means they know how to win the close ones. Do just enough to get the win. I looked at this, I'm like, that's very reminiscent to the 2021 West Hancock team up to this point in the season.
I think if you look at that Dyke New Hartford score, it was close last year, close this year. You're looking at 2 towns that are 15 miles apart. It's a Britt Garner type of situation. They know each other well. They know what they're going to run. And Dyke is a very good team, but I think it doesn't matter I mean, I think back to when I was in school there, we had a really close game with Dyke. We beat them 14-2, if my memory serves me right. And I'm not sure what the halftime score was, but I do remember that we give up the safety because we were pinned deep inside the 5, and instead of doing something stupid right before halftime, we just decided to flip the field and give up the 2 points and punt or snapped it out of the end zone on purpose. That's a secret, but I don't think anybody from Dyke ever figured that out, that we did that on purpose. But that's, those 2 teams have known each other, so I don't know if that score, Grundy won that game and it was close. And I'm not taking anything away against Dyke New Hartford, but I'm saying Dyke knows what Grundy wants to do. It's like the West Hancock and Garner Hayfield games over the years. It didn't matter how good one team was or the other team. It was always going to be a close game.
Yeah, you just want to get out of there with the win.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's make predictions for Woodbury Central versus Grundy, and then we'll move on to our game. I'm never betting against Grundy until they're playing West Hancock. Then obviously I'll pick West Hancock on years where we're better. But I'm going to go with Grundy. I think it's going to be like a 21-7 type of game. I just think their defense is too good, even though Woodbury's offense is pretty stout. We thought the same thing last year as well, and ended up being 28-7. If I had to pick a second score, I'd say all of a sudden it turns into a shootout, 35-28 type of game, but I see the first score being more realistic. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, defense wins championships, and like I said, I think this defense is legit. I don't know about. I think Grundy's going to be hard to score on, and I don't know if I could really put a score out there, but I would say, Woodbury's got a fighting chance. I know the line at BC Moore, as Jay said, it's really close, but I think Grundy pulls it out by touchdown or so. It might be a low-scoring game, even 2 teams that throw it all over the place and are capable of moving the ball, and it's still, I think it might be a low-scoring game.
I'm gonna go with the weird score and say 16-13. Gordon, you said, is the kicker.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm gonna say a field goal is the difference. With Woodbury Central, I would not be surprised if they were to win the game, just because what they are offensively, and 2 X factors. One X factor being gone in Logan Kanawha. I think their I think Grundy Center's defense is the best it's ever been. Really, really good. And like you said, Dan, they were a lot like us last year. We were super good defensively. Grundy Center's kind of put up those numbers, and Patrick Brown III is kind of the anchor of that defense. But Logan Kanawha being that X factor being gone just makes me a little bit nervous. And then the X factor for Woodbury Central is, I think Max McGill is one of those kids, like, just watching him. I don't know the kid at all, but just kind of researching this game. He's a senior. It's his last go around. Looks to me to be ultra competitive type of kid. And I think for Woodbury Central, if they were to win, he puts them on their back and makes a few plays defensively as well as offensively. But my prediction though will be Grundy Center 16-13. I think it's going to be a really, really good football game, just because I don't think Grundy, they're not as explosive offensively as they were the last couple of years, but defensively, man, they're lights out.
Yeah, I like your point though, Jay, and Kevin made the point of Grundy's sophomore and junior heavy. Maybe that sense of urgency isn't there like it is for a team that's more full of seniors, and Woodbury has a little more of that senior leadership just because they have more seniors. There's just not a lot of seniors on Grundy's team. And then you also mentioned a kicker named Gordon. My mind went Gordon Armstrong immediately.
My man.
Yeah, 1922 to 1924. So, all right. Let me scroll to Linville. They're my team. I'm going to break down, and not as well as you guys did. I'm more of the history guy, of course. Linville first made the playoffs in 85. 86, they won the Class 1A state championship. They beat Britt 12-7 in the finals that year. that was the last time Linville made it to the Unidome in any capacity. And then you can see on the screen here, made it to the first round in quarters and then the second round a couple times. One thing I noticed, 2011, they gave Lisbon their best playoff game besides West Hancock, and we lost to them 14-12 in the finals. And then 2012 all the way down to 2021 was either first round, second round, or quarters. And then obviously 21 or 22 now they're 3-0 and going to play us in the Dome for a total of 16 playoff appearances. Their coach, Mike Parkinson, I was telling these guys before we recorded, he came in 2010, but he left for at least 1 year, maybe 2 years. And I want to say like 2013 to 2015, something like that. He left for a little bit to be a coordinator at a big school and then came back. And I couldn't find online when that was. So I'm just assuming he was there the whole time. If he had been there the whole time, his record is 83-47. So probably like 75-40 would be his probably more accurate record. 2019 and 2020, they were 1-8 and 1-5. So to bounce back and make the playoffs last year, losing the second round after a couple 1-win seasons, I thought was pretty impressive. What I have on Linville, here's their scores. First of all, if you want to look at that, they're intriguing games. Pleasantville 32-7 in week 1. It's hard to judge anything from week 1, Jay always says. At Madrid in week 6, Madrid, we were kind of thinking they might win a playoff game or so and mess up the Pods a little bit. They beat them 36-14. Otherwise, they didn't have a close game until this last quarterfinal game against AHSTW, where they won that one 20-0. They won that game by a first quarter punt return by Quarter Noun Harder. I think that's one of the best sports names ever. CNH is what I'm going to probably refer to him as. They led 14-0 at halftime, 14-0 into the third, and then they ended up winning the game 20-0. That game was played in the rain. It stopped raining up in Britt, but it kept raining. I think we had like 28 hours of straight rain down here. They did a lot of misdirection. That's what I read in one of the articles. They outgained AHSTW 130-103 in the game. So not a lot of rushing yards. I think teams were just happy to hold on to the ball and not make any crazy mistakes. Linville only passed the ball twice and did not complete a pass. That Quarter Noun Harder, CNH, 22 carries for 92 yards, 1 touchdown. That was a 1-yarder. Then he had the punt return for touchdown. Their passing game stats, though, are pretty similar to West Hancock's. They're 43 of 80 on the year for 846 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Rushing wise, they have 330 carries for 2,726 yards and 50 touchdowns. CNH is responsible for 27 of those, and he has all but about 700 of the rushing yards. They have a senior named Kyle Squires. Make more sense if I actually went to their stats and showed you so you can see them. Kyle Squires, 72 carries, 485 yards, 9 touchdowns. And then CJ Nichols, a junior, 41 carries, 432, and 5 touchdowns, kind of rounds out their rushing game. Quarterback, you can see up here, it's only a sophomore, Landon Montgomery, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 767 on the year. His main targets are Connor Maston, he's a senior, 19 catches, 477, kind of Ryland Barnes type numbers, 9 touchdowns. And then obviously the CNH, he's that type of athlete you can get him out in space and throw a little screen to. And then Caleb Rhea, not sure how you say his name, 8 catches, 200 yards. So they have 3-4 kids they like to throw it to. Going down to defense here, 17 fumble recoveries, which, what do we say? Woodbury only had 5. So big difference there. And then 14 interceptions, 31 takeaways. Those numbers stood out to me a little bit. CNH has 1 kickoff return for a touchdown. And then they have 5 punt returns for touchdowns, which Looking from the West Hancock side, I'm like, that might be an advantage to Linville, but if our offense does what we know it can do, we won't be punting the ball a whole lot on Thursday, hopefully. Good kicker, 41 of 49, made one field goal, which for Class A, if you make a field goal, that's something to talk about. Other than that, yeah, that's my take on Linville.
I noticed they had 8 touchbacks on their kickoffs.
Oh, did
And
they?
if my memory serves me right, just give me just a second here.
Yep, you're right.
That's a pretty good average. They put it in the end zone on kickoffs 8 times. I was thinking, let me just look at something real quick.
That's outdoors too, so inside the dome, that's an advantage as well. So
I think go ahead.
Good.
I think Grundy Center has 14 touchbacks on kickoffs. That's astounding to me.
They've always had good kickers. I mean, we know as a fact that's one thing we're kind of lacking at West Hancock kicking wise, but Grundy's always had a solid kicker. Yeah. Anything you guys want to add about Linville?
Yeah, going back that their quarterfinal game played in a monsoon really favored Linville in that game. AHSTW came into that game throwing the ball all over the yard, and the Sternberg kid, I can't remember if it's what the quarterback's name was. I believe it's Sternberg, but I'm sure somebody out there will correct me if I'm wrong. But they came in throwing the ball all over the place. They only threw it 3 times in that game. They lost 3 fumbles. And from an article that I read, I think they had 4 or 5 times where they dropped a snap. So weather played a key role in that game. The other thing, Linville-Sully, that I noticed, obviously CNH, he's a playmaker, and when you watch him on film, he's faster than everybody else on film. Now it's hard to judge, who they're playing and as far as competition wise and how that compares to who we play, just because we're from different parts of the state. But I looked at, obviously his rushing yards were really, really good. He's got 2 interceptions and he's returned both of them back for touchdowns. And then, like you said, Dan, he's got 4 kick and punt returns together. So he's a playmaker all over the place. And then the thing that jumped out to me was I always go back and look at all state teams from last year to see, if they've got anybody coming back. Linville-Sully's had 3 guys that were on the 3rd team All-State last year. CNH was a 3rd team All-Stater at running back. The Squires kid was a 3rd team All-State at linebacker, and then Connor Matston was All-State at defensive back. So they've got 3 really nice players that they were building around coming into this year. And offensively, I was talking with some of the coaches tonight. We had open gym, and they actually had practice tonight because everything's moved up a day since we're playing on Thursday. And they're pretty comparable to HMS and how they run their stuff, but they run a lot more misdirection than what HMS does. HMS is a lot more straight power, or straight right, straight left in their run game. Linville-Sully tries to kind of get you moving one way with their eyes and then bring somebody back the other way and either trap you or run a counter at you. So they want to keep the ball on the ground, but I was impressed. Other than CNH, the Squires kid is the one that stood out to me. Really tough at linebacker.
Kevin, do you have anything on Linville that you've been looking at? Oh, you're muted, Kevin. You're muted.
Look at the frustration. There he is.
Hey, I've got a lot of people like that, but I was going to say what I would add to it is, yeah, they're quick. I haven't watched a great deal of it. Jay's watched more than I have, the way it sounds, and I know, talking with Brady, he says, he gave me a hard time. He says, you fall for a fake once in a while. And in fact, I did it Friday night. I fell for a fake and didn't know who had the ball. And Vixel is 20 yards beyond the line of scrimmage before I realized he had the ball. But he says, you're gonna have a hard time with these guys because they really do carry out fakes and they do a lot of misdirection. And you'll have a kid running towards the on a sweep, and the fullback will have the ball running up the field, and so yeah, that's it's gonna take some discipline on defense.
All right,
They-
go ahead, Jay.
I was gonna say Kevin, they kind of remind me of, it's not the same running game as far as running game design, but they remind me a lot of St. Ansgar and how they carry out their fakes. You know, St. Ansgar
Yeah.
does a great job of that. We're always getting fooled by the quarterback running downfield without the ball, but that's kind of how Linville does. They are very disciplined with 3 guys typically carrying out a run fake.
Yeah, quarterback has 300 yards rushing and he never touched the ball all night because he was just carrying out fakes.
All right, let's quickly get to West Hancock here. Don't need to spend a ton of time there because we already know a lot. We're 56-28 all time in playoff games. I thought that was fun to point out because we've now doubled our playoff wins compared to playoff losses. In our 33 appearances, we've lost 4 times in the first round, once in the second round, 11 quarterfinal trophies at school, 6 semifinal trophies, 4 runner-ups, 4 state champs. We'll be adding to one of those, either semis, runner-ups, or state champs here in the next week or so. Coach Bob Sanger, as we all know, led West Hancock to 30 of those playoff appearances. His last one was a co-head coach situation with Mark. So Mark has 4. And so if you're doing the math, you're like, that's 34, not 33. Mark and Coach Sanger each got a playoff appearance in 2019. Mark has a 13-1 playoff record so far, which is pretty astounding for a little, it's very short head coaching career. Of course, we all know the results from the season so far, going through starting at Garner and then all the way down to North Linn. We've given up a few more points this year than we did last year, but obviously some of the points given up were at the end of games with some of the backups in and whatnot. So defense is still obviously pretty stout. Offense can put up some points. Stat wise, you guys throw in anything you want here at any point, but 831 passing yards, 35-39 in rushing yards, 53 touchdowns. Pretty typical West Hancock football there. The passing yards though, man, I mean, I'm going through the record book and talking to you guys. I'm like, man, Ryland's breaking these receiving records and Mitchell's climbing up in the passing ranks. And then we look at Woodbury Central and go, yeah, it's a little different type of football played. But for West Hancock standards, we're doing pretty well, I'd say. What do you guys think about stat wise, record wise, and then we'll make our prediction.
One of my favorite stats. Where is it here? Go to receiving real quick.
Okay, right here. Who are you looking for?
Well, Mitchell is our leading passer, our second leading rusher, and he has the second most catches on the team. That's one of my favorite stats.
Him and Jackson now are tied with 5.
Yeah. So, but no, we talked about at the beginning of the year. We knew that this team it wasn't gonna be just, fullback, run a counter, fullback, you know what I mean? Run a trap, something like that. Just a ton of weapons on this team. And I think the coaching staff, they've done a great job of opening up the playbook, and they add a new wrinkle every week. If you watch it close enough, like against, I believe it was Wapsie, Kevin, when we came out, and that was the first time we've seen a trips bunch set out of the gun formation. So they're adding new wrinkles, and I know they still have a lot of stuff in their playbook that, obviously a good team knows that they're going to need to hold some things back because teams scout you, especially in today's world of huddle. I mean, I'm sure Linville-Sully's got every single snap on huddle, and they're breaking down tendencies and things like that. So you've got to have new things to throw at them. And we've done a really good job of throwing different formations and different looks and just a ton of weapons that can hurt you. And then the other thing I want to say is there was a lot of question marks going into the season, offensive line wise. We lost John Martinez, was an all-stater. We lost a lot of really good offensive linemen. And I think this offensive line is really starting to gel. Eric Martinez, he's terrific pulling from his guard spot. He's fun to watch if you're into offensive line play. But I thought they've done a really, really good job of opening up holes for their ball carriers and then giving Mitch and Rhett time to throw. But it's a fun offense to watch just because you don't know what they're going to do or who's going to touch the ball from play to play.
Yeah, I would agree. The diversity of the weapons this year just astounds me because I've been watching West Hancock football for a long time, as have you guys. And when you're running a wing T and your primary rushing attack is with the fullback, and we've had some guys over the years that have put up some crazy numbers from the fullback position. And then you look at this team where the total yardage is about the same, but we've got 11 guys, 12 guys that have carried the ball this year and still putting up that yardage, but we're doing it. There's so many different attacks, and I'll just use this as an example. With Zool at fullback, and then you bring in Bixel, and the two guys play the same position, but they have such different running styles. And to make the defensive adjustment in those running styles during the course of a game, you can really cause havoc for defenses.
Yeah, and the fact that Kale only, I use the word only kind of weird, oddly there, but only 182 carries after 11 games.
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell, 109 carries. I know he's a quarterback, and that's probably high for a quarterback for the type of offense we run, though. That's not a huge workload. And then Brady, like you said, man, I could see him getting some more snaps in not just backup time. When he had that 86-yarder the other night, I think one of you guys said he was shot out of a cannon. And then my dad texted me about 10 seconds after you said that, like, man, that kid shot out of a cannon. Who is he? Didn't recognize the last name.
Yeah, he was literally 10, 15 yards downfield before I even realized he had the ball.
Yeah. And then
Jay and I were thinking, well, what's that guy doing running down the field? And wait, he's got the ball. So
yeah, he's doing his job. Ryland, 11 carries and 27 catches. A Division I athlete has 38 touches offensively. And it's, some people might go, man, they're misusing that kid. I was like, no, we're saving him and don't really need to at this point yet. That's what blows my mind. So
Ryland also is a devastating blocker.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to credit yards on blocks, to the blocker, but I bet if we went back and credited and say, okay, Ryland threw this key block, he throws. I know it's, I honestly thought that we would see him get some carries at fullback this year, just because of his size and strength and speed and that. But he opens up holes so many times. Kevin, how many times have I watched a replay of a touchdown and I'll go back and I always want to credit the, who made the key block. And it seems like 80% of the time, Ryland caught a key block there. There was a counter the other night. He missed the block for JP in the first quarter, maybe it's the first possession even. He kind of ran by the kid, overran him, and you could see he was kind of ticked off at himself. But then the next time we ran that long counter with JP, I think it was, he actually caught two guys. He caught two blocks on the same play. And then I think with what he does receiving wise, that also opens it up for teams, because you have to respect where he's at, because just at the time that you don't realize, like, okay, let's identify where number 5's at. That's about the time we're going to run a pass play and he's 10 yards behind you, and he catches everything. I mean, I can't remember a drop ball that he's had this year.
Nope. All right, let's make our predictions here. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
I had made a note about what Jay said, because Corbin Woods was the defensive end that he missed the block on.
Yeah.
And I commented to Jay right away, because I saw Ryland was pretty disgusted with himself, because Corbin did a great job catching JP from behind. And if Ryland makes that block, it's probably in the house. And Ryland, he just flat didn't get him. Ran past him and didn't think about him, because I think he maybe thought that defensive end wasn't going to get out there. So it was a great job by Woods to get out there. But just if he makes that block, that goes to the house.
All right, prediction time here. I'm going Linville-Sully. Big here. No, I'm just kidding. I'll pick West Hancock in this one. I don't need to give a score, but I think we win by at least a couple scores. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would agree that I think there's an experience factor in this game also, because these kids from West Hancock been there in the dome. They understand what goes on down there. It's a different atmosphere when you get down in the dome. The crowd's going to be bigger. The atmosphere is going to be different than what you've, and the scheduling, just the scheduling too, the timing of things, everything is different there. And we know from experience that does make a difference in these games.
Well, Jay, do you ditto that?
Ditto. I'm not going to give a score prediction, especially if you're going to post this anywhere for other people to watch. But I think West Hancock is the favorite, and the favorite for good reason. Linville-Sully, they've had a great season. CNH's numbers are eye-popping. I'm excited to watch him, just to see what kind of athlete he is, and if we can contain him or not. I know we've had experience. We've been successful in the past few years going up against some really, really good running backs and being able to keep them in check. And it'll be another great challenge on Thursday. But Kevin nailed it. The experience of being down there, the routine, the bus ride, the background, you're playing indoors, which in itself is just strange, right? You're playing indoors, and just the familiarity with the Unidome, I think, is a big advantage to West Hancock. And then from a physicality standpoint, I just don't see Lynnville being able to match up with us at the line of scrimmage.
And
We
played.
Oh,
How cool is it that we have 4 undefeated teams in the semifinals?
Very cool.
Only class. Yeah. And we played the 10 o'clock game last year too. So I remember Rick and I left at like 6 for the game that morning. So it was the 10 o'clock. I was trying to think about that. It's odd playing football at 10 o'clock in the morning. Kind of a strange situation there. So we all agree West Hancock versus Grundy, part 4, coming up in a week. Obviously, you got to play the game on the field. So we'll see what happens on Thursday. Let's do some quick predictions here on the other classes. 8-player, it's Newell Fonda against Waco, and then Lennox versus St. Mary's Remsen. I'm going with Waco over Newell Fonda and St. Mary's over Lennox, with Waco winning the championship. What do you guys think for 8-man?
I would say Waco and St. Mary's, but I'm gonna stick with St. Mary's just because they've been there. They know how to win championships, and they've been the team to beat.
There's some guy on Iowa Preps that was breaking down 8-man football, and we broke it down the last time, and our breakdowns were based on, like, I picked Waco just because of how they look in basketball uniforms. So after reading this guy seemed pretty educated. I think he was a Fremont Mills fan. It sounds like St. Mary's is like miles ahead of everybody else, but I'm going to stick with my Waco Warriors to pull off the upset. They beat St. Mary's in the championship game. I'm probably going to be wrong, but that's my pick, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Class 1A. This 10 o'clock game, I'd love to go see this one. West Branch versus Van Meter. West Branch, their coach Butch Peterson, is it's eerily similar to what with the Sangers in 2019. He's got some rare form of cancer right now. Team is phenomenal. I was reading an article and I was like, holy cow, I feel like I've read this already. It's just crazy. So our thoughts and prayers going out to the Peterson family. Hard to root against West Branch. I know they're the 4 seed. I know Van Meter is that team that's been there for, I think this is like their 7th or 8th straight year in the Dome. So the smart pick would be Van Meter. So I'm going to say, yes, Van Meter, I think, will win this game, but I think I'll be safe in saying that let's go Bears and hope they win for Coach Peterson. Underwood and West Sioux, I had a hard time picking who I thought were going to win both of these games, besides the fact that I think Van Meter is the smart choice, but I'm going to go with West Sioux. Again, they have the experience, pretty explosive offense. I'm going to go with Van Meter versus West Sioux, with Van Meter winning it, but secretly West Branch is my pick to win it all.
Well, we from the beginning, even the last pods, I picked West Branch, and I'm going to stick with my guns on that one. I think they pull it off. I think it'll be a good game. I think they're going to face West Sioux in the championship game. And I just think the West Branch pulls it off this year. I don't know. I'm just a gut feeling. I have zero reason for it other than that's just my gut.
I think, Jay.
West Branch, if you get, did I send this to you, Dan? West Branch has the best football website in high school football. Go check it out. It is amazing, and that needs to be our next goal for West Hancock football. I believe they had one of their better running backs get injured in the quarterfinal game in the first half. They played in the monsoon as well. Yeah, great. I mean, it's just with what's going on with them, very comparable to Coach Sanger and what we all went through in 2019. But I think Van Meter's too much for them. So I'm going to go Van Meter, West Sioux in a rematch of last year's championship game. So I've got a rematch in Class A and a rematch in Class 1A. And I think Van Meter gets it done again. Their only loss this year, I believe, was to Williamsburg.
Yeah. By like
early
5 points.
Yeah, early in the season, and Williamsburg is really, really tough this year. So I'm going to go with the champs to repeat over West Sioux again.
And looking at the seeding, the top 2 seeds both have a loss.
Yep.
The bottom 2 don't. I mean, it's, if people don't know, it's the coaches that seed this. So the 8 coaches get on a Zoom the week before the quarterfinals and go 1 through 8, and then that's the seeding. So it makes me hard pressed to pick against Van Meter and West Sioux, because when you got knowledgeable coaches are the ones that are saying these are the top 2 teams, that's hard to go against. 2A, we have Wahlert Catholic against Williamsburg. That's the 1-4 matchup. And then OA-BCIG against Central Lyon George Little Rock. I'm going with Williamsburg and Central Lyon George Little Rock, with CLGLR winning it all.
Ditto, but I do like that OA-BCIG Central Lyon matchup. I think that'll be a fun game.
Yeah.
But I do think that I went with Central Lyon too.
I got the same as you guys. I think that's going to be a really, really good championship game if that's how it turns out. Williamsburg, super tough. I'm going to go with Central Lyon George Little Rock as well, just because that's who I went with from this when we had our first podcast, and Zach Blutmer and company. I think they get it done and bring home a championship banner.
Class 3A on the left here, we have ADM versus Harlan and Humboldt versus Mount Vernon. I'm going to go Cinderella story here and pick Harlan. I don't know if they've ever been in the Dome before, so I'm going to say that Harlan picks up a win. Actually, they've probably played more games in the Dome than most programs have playoff games ever.
They might have played more games in the Dome than UNI has played in the Dome.
Yeah. Yeah. So Harlan, I think that's an obvious choice. And then I'd love to pick Humboldt. Derek Ellman, a Buffalo Center boy, is the head coach there, and he's done a great job. I just think Mount Vernon, that's Lance Peterson, I believe, is still the coach over there. I'm going to go Harlan, Mount Vernon, with Harlan winning, I think, their 14th state championship.
I'm going Harlan, Mount Vernon, and I'm going to stick with Mount Vernon winning the championship. I thought if they were going to get beat, that Solon would have been the team to do it, and I think they're going to win it.
But it'd be a great story if both West Branch and Mount Vernon could get to the championship. I don't know what the schedule is, if they would play on the same day or not. And looking at semifinals, they won it, but be a heck of a story. But I'm going to say Mount Vernon gets there. I'm going to say Harlan gets there, and I'm going to say as long as Aiden Hall stays healthy and Harlan's key players stay healthy, they win both their semifinal and championship game by 2 to 3 scores or more. For some reason, I've come across them on different social media sites, and I remember watching their game against Lewis Central. They played them in week 0, I believe. And man, are they good. They are the Casper Bauer, I believe it's Casper Bauer is the quarterback. Aiden Hall is a stud. He's going to Iowa next year. They're very, very good football team, and I'll take them to roll to a championship, I should say.
All right, Class 4A. We have Carlisle against Lewis Central, and then North Scott against Xavier. They went with the RPI rankings in the upper classes, so it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's based on how their RPI was. So we have 1, 3, 5, and 6. Lewis Central just beat Indianola, but Indianola gave them, or no, it was Xavier that beat Indianola, but Indianola gave Xavier a better game. But I still think it's going to be Xavier and Lewis Central in the finals here, as much as I'd like to see Carlisle win, because they're just about 15 minutes down the road from here. But Lewis Central and Xavier, I think, are cream of the crop in 4A. I think Xavier takes the title. I want them to win the title because they did beat Indianola, but I'm sticking with Xavier. What do you think, Kevin?
I agree with Lewis Central over Carlisle, Xavier over North Scott. I think that'll be a good game. I think that North Scott's been tested. They do have 2 losses, but they're a good football team. I've picked Lewis Central. I watched that game that Jay watched when they played Harlan at the beginning of the season, and they came from behind to win that one. Harlan had that one, and there was very little time on the clock when Lewis Central came back and did it. And I'm going to stick with my pick there and pick Lewis Central to win it.
Yeah, another championship game rematch, Lewis Central and Xavier. That's who I'm going with again. I'm going to go Lewis Central as well again. Well-balanced team. Xavier's really great program as well, but I'm going Lewis Central and Xavier. I honestly would be surprised if either one of those teams struggle at all in the semifinals. I think they both may win their semifinal games by a good amount.
I know some people will argue like there's too many classes, but looking at a Carlisle type of team, if we were still in, there was no 5A, teams like Carlisle, they're not at the Dome. They're not saying they're not a good team because they are, but I do like seeing a little bit of, because they would have gone to Harlan probably in the quarterfinals if they were still a 3A team. So it is kind of fun to see some of these teams break through and get in. And that includes in Class 5A this year, Johnston makes the Dome for the first time ever. I think they might as well just play these games at Valley Stadium because it's literally 4 Metro teams. We got Valley versus Dowling, Johnston against Southeast Polk. Hard to pick against Dowling here, 10-1 versus 7-4, but that's a rivalry game, regardless of what round of the playoffs or regular season. That's intriguing, but I still think Dowling wins that game. I'm going to go with Southeast Polk over Johnston. Johnston's just going to be happy to be there type of thing. So Southeast Polk versus Dowling. I'm going to take probably, I would say the safe pick, but I don't know if there's a safe pick here. I still think Dowling's going to win, even though I think it'll be a really good game. What do you think, Jay?
I think Southeast Polk, I think they roll in the semifinals. I'm going to pick Dowling to win it all, but I think they squeak by. I think that the Valley Dowling, just the rivalry of it, I think that's going to be a really, really good football game, closer than a 14 versus 1 seed. And Valley has the advantage. They beat Cedar Falls last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
They played that game in the Dome, I believe. So they were there last week. They played in the Dome, but I'm going to go with Dowling to squeak by Valley and then beat Southeast Polk in the championship. I know Southeast Polk, they beat Dowling by a score or 2 in week 1 of the season. But like I always say, I always throw out week 1. My pick going into 5A playoffs was Ankeny because I thought they had the best quarterback in J.J. Cole, who's going to Iowa State next year. He got knocked out, so then I'm going to go to the other Division I quarterback, Jackson Smolik. He's going to Penn State. He's the quarterback for Dowling Catholic. So I'm going to say Dowling Catholic gets Southeast Polk in a rematch, and they bring home, I don't know how many championships Dowling Catholic's won, but they've won a lot.
I think, yeah.
They add 1 to the list.
Yep. Kevin?
Well, I'm going to go with Dowling over Valley. Like Jay said, I think that'll be a squeaker. I think it'll be a fun game. If I wasn't doing anything, I'd be going down there to watch that one. Then Southeast Polk over Johnston. I'm probably going to get a message from Andy Pollack if he sees this, but I'm going to pick. I said when we did our first podcast, Southeast Polk was my pick to win, And so I'm gonna stick with them just because I'm not gonna change my mind now. I think it'll be a close game though between them and Dowling, but and especially in the dome, not out in the weather. But I'm gonna stick with Southeast Polk.
Awesome. All right, fellas. Kevin's looking a little sleepy here. I'm very sleepy. My cat woke me up at about 3:30 this morning. Yeah, so I'm tired too. But I do have two sponsors tonight. They're both from my church. They both wrote books, so I'll post those their Amazon links. You can see them on my screen here. Kristi Dusenbery and Jan Rozga. So thanks to them for sponsoring as always, fellas. The best time of the year. Semifinals. Here we go. So thanks again for coming on. We were, I guess, highly requested to do another one of these, so we don't want to disappoint the masses. So thanks as always for doing this.
All right.
Thanks,
Anything
Dan.
else you want to throw out there real quick?
So I got, there's a pep rally on Tuesday night, Kevin, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
So
like
pep rally on Tuesday night. So if you're watching-
7:30, I believe.
yeah, so make sure you get out there to support the kids, and get down to the Unidome bright and early. Drive safe, and should be a fun time.
you bet. All right, go Eagles.
Go Eagles.